Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Wonderful to be with Celebrate Mercy again, and especially on this wonderful conversation that we're having on Sayyida Maryam and also Sayyidina Ieasha alayhim as-salam. You know, subhanAllah, this topic, this particular verse or verses that I'm going to cover today often comes up as a point of question where people ask, is it true that Sayyida Maryam had said, maybe it would have been better not to be alive? And people wonder what that verse exactly means. So let me refer the verse to you so you're familiar with what I'm saying. We're talking now from Surah Maryam, verse 23. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing how Sayyida Maryam at this point in her life is going to be giving birth to Sayyidina Ieasha. And she's far away from family, and she's going through the pains of childbirth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it and says, فَأَجَاءَهَا الْمَخَاضُ إِلَى جِذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ فَقَالَتْ يَا لَيْتَنِي مِتُّ قَبْلَ هَذَا وَكُنْتُ نَسْيًا مَنْسِيًّا. I'll translate that she had the pains of childbirth come to her, and she was by and drove her, it basically made her go to the trunk of the palm tree. And she said, oh, I wish I had died before this, and I was long forgotten. And people wonder, because the immediate question which we're going to actually clear up right off the bat here, because sometimes people wonder, is it even permissible to wish for death? Is that something that we're allowed to say, that I wish I had died before this moment and I was long forgotten? And is she saying this because she was in such intense pain? Like, what was happening for Sayyida Maryam? What was the psychology behind all of this? Which of course ties into our conversation today about the mental health discussion. And it's important to understand a couple of things. First of all, Sayyida Maryam's age. She's very young. There's some discussion back and forth on how old she was exactly. But here we're talking about someone who's likely in her teens, as far as we can tell from the teachers, from the mufassirun, those who interpret the Quran. Also, it is clarified to us that it's not actually the pangs of childbirth that is causing her to say these words, but actually she was worried about what her community was going to think about her, what the people around her. She didn't want to be a fitna to them. That when she comes forward with a child in her hand, no husband, and doesn't really have an explanation because it's a miraculous birth, that she knew this could really mess with the minds and the hearts of the people. And so she was worried about them, and that's why she was saying, I wish I was long forgotten. Now, is it possible or permissible for a person who's feeling high levels of distress to say such words? Well, we have a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's very important, actually, because in this particular hadith that I'm going to narrate to you, you see here that there is a discussion, and I take this discussion, for those of you interested, from the book Maharimul Lisan, or Prohibitions of the Tongue, by Shaykh Muhammad Mawlud. And it's a very important hadith, so let me explain to you. This is a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ says that none of us should wish for death. None of us should wish for death, right? And we should say instead, Allahumma ahini ma kanat al-hayatu khayran li wa tawaffani idha kanat al-wafatu khayran li. And I'll translate. Oh Allah, allow me to be alive as long as life is good for me, and allow me to die if death is better for me. This is really important, this particular hadith and dua that the Prophet ﷺ teaches us. And it's so interesting because here you understand that we're not allowed to wish for death, but sometimes you're in extreme circumstances, unfathomable circumstances, similar to what Sayyida Maryam was going through. And it's only human, natural human ability to be able to say, to kind of just say, oh, I wish this was over. That's normative. And the Prophet ﷺ doesn't say in this hadith, bad on you, shame on you for thinking this way. Rather, he gives us a solution of what to say. And the dua literally says, oh Allah, if life is better for me, allow me to live. And if death is better for me, take me. And that then teaches those of us who have ever felt this way, and even the caretakers, family, friends, those who are in the mental health caretakers who help care for people who are not feeling well, to understand that actually, if this person says this dua continuously, and they are still alive the next day, that Allah has answered your prayer and life was good for you. The continuation of life is better for you. And that when you die, then that was when death is best for you. What it means, though, is that you and I are not appointing the time of our own death. That is for Allah and only Allah, right? And so that's a powerful lesson that we learn in this particular surah. And many people focus in and they kind of like zone in and hone in just right on this one verse, verse 23. And they don't look closely at what comes after this, because the next two verses are just as powerful. It's kind of incredible that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now going to speak directly to Sayyidah Maryam, right? Because the next verse, verse 24, فَنَادَاهَا مِن تَحْتِهَا أَلَّا تَحْزَنِي قَدْ جَعَلَ رَبُّكِ تَحْتِكِ سَرِيًّا. And he calls from beneath her and he says, don't be sad. Your Lord has made a stream beneath you. وَهُزِّي إِلَيْكِ بِجُذْعِ النَّخْلَةِ تُسَاقِطْ عَلَيْكِ رُطَبًا جَنِيًّا. And shake the trunk of the palm tree. The ripe dates will fall upon you, and eat and drink and let your eyes be comforted. And that was the rest of verse 26. So it's amazing when you think of what happens here. She's crying out kind of this really intense emotion that she's having. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending her this message. And you might think, what deal of shaking a palm tree? I don't know if any of you have ever tried to shake a palm tree trunk. I'm in California, so we have palm trees here. If you ever get the chance, go to the palm tree and say, I'm doing the Sunnah of Maryam, and try to shake that trunk. It is hard to shake the trunk of a palm tree. For those of you who've tried, you know what I mean. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say this to her? It's evident that Sayyidah Maryam was in pain, both mentally and physically. She was going through so much. And when someone's in such a difficult mental state and physical state, there is a certain kind of anguish that is often very raw and unfiltered. And so she just says exactly how she's feeling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as should we. And Allah's response to her isn't, don't say that, I expect more of you. No. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is he comforts her. He tells her, don't be sad, right? I'm listening to you. And then he gives her something very concrete to do, which is powerful. Shaking the palm tree trunk. What is this all about? Well, let me tell you. If you ever meet somebody who's going through a really difficult trial, there are 3 steps I'd like you to take into consideration that I'm taking directly from these verses. Number 1, listen to them. Listen to them the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala listened to Sayyidah Maryam. That if somebody comes to you in pain, meet them where they are. Chastising them, scolding them isn't going to help them any. In fact, if anything, it's going to make them shut down more and feel even more pain and not willing to get help. Number 2, give them something concrete advice, concrete help. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to her, with this physical and emotional pain that she's having, he addresses both things. For the emotional, he says, don't be sad. We're going to relieve your pain. And for the physical, he tells her to shake the palm tree, and it gives her nourishment, because dates, as now we understand in medical literature that have done scientific research on this, the dates actually have the fiber and the nutrition to help with the pangs of childbirth and contractions. It's kind of amazing, actually, when you think about this. And the fact, then number 3, something we often say to people that are going through pain and you're trying to counsel and help them, distract them from the pain. So even though, say, the Maryam is going through extreme hardship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala validates her sadness. He gives her something to do that distracts her from the pain. Go take the palm tree and shake it. and stand on your own 2 feet and get this help, inshallah ta'ala, through these dates. And of course, the surah, the verses are going to carry forward, because she says, how am I supposed to answer the questions of my people? And he teaches her and he says, you are silent. You are fasting from speaking, and pointing to the baby, who there's going to be another miracle of the baby, Sayyidina Ieasha, speaking to the people and explaining what's happening here. And so to close, I just want to remind us, sometimes it's much more important to be able to say to somebody who's going through a lot of anguish and pain, physical and mental, to say, I hear you. I'm here for you. Validating sadness, listening to them, providing support to them, having a reaction that isn't judgmental, not invalidating that emotion, but instead actually listening and providing whatever support you're capable of doing is so much more important than you problem solving and trying to solve the issue at hand. And so I hope, inshallah, this reflection about Sayyidah Maryam and her experience, as we understand in the Quran, this snapshot in time of this surah, helps alleviate all of us who are going through any mental and physical anguish, emotional anguish. And I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to have the Quran be our guides in all matters. Allahumma ameen. Wa sallallahu ala al-hadi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in.